It was Father's Day morning, the kind of quiet Sunday you dream about when you're 70 years old and finally retired. The sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting soft shadows across Diane's herb garden, basil and rosemary she'd tended for years. I was halfway through my coffee, the newspaper spread out on the table, when the doorbell rang. A delivery truck idled in our driveway, an unusual sight for a Sunday. The driver handed me a package, a plain cardboard box about the size of a loaf of bread, with no return address. "Happy Father's Day, Mr. Thompson," he said with a quick smile before heading back to his truck. I carried the box inside, setting it on the coffee table. "It's from Caleb," I said, assuming it was from our son. Diane appeared in the doorway, her apron dusted with flour from her morning baking. She squinted at the box, her smile fading. "Harold," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Don't open it." I froze, my fingers already reaching for the tape. "Why not?" I asked. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on the box. "Can't you tell? Listen." I leaned in, and there it was, a faint, unsettling hum like a distant swarm of insects. My stomach tightened. "What the hell is that?" I muttered. Diane's hand gripped my arm, her nails digging in. "Something's wrong, Harold. Call someone." Within 15 minutes, the police were at our door, their cruiser parked crookedly in our quiet Oregon suburb. You won't believe what was inside that box. But before I get to that, let me take you back to where this all started, just 1 week ago. It was a rainy evening, the kind that makes our old Craftsman house feel cozy and safe, or at least it used to. Diane and I were in the living room, the fire crackling, when Caleb and his wife, Vanessa, showed up unannounced. Our son, 40 years, old, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a designer jacket I knew we'd indirectly paid for, didn't bother with small talk. "Dad," he said, pacing in front of the fireplace, "I need the money now. Not when you're gone. I've got a business deal, a real opportunity." I clutched the stack of retirement papers I'd been reviewing, my knuckles whitening. 40. Years as an engineer, working overtime, missing family dinners, skipping vacations, all to build a nest egg for Diane and me, and to leave something for Caleb when the time came. "Caleb," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. "I'm not your personal bank. You'll get your inheritance when it's time." Vanessa, perched on the edge of our leather couch, chimed in, her tone sharp. "Come on, Harold. It's just a few thousand to get us started." "Don't you want to see your son succeed?" "A few thousand." I almost laughed. Last year it was Caleb's emergency car repair. Before that, Vanessa's credit card debt from her online shopping sprees. The requests never stopped, each, one bolder than the last. "Caleb," I said, standing slowly, my knees creaking from years of hard work. "I've been bailing you out for a decade. My retirement fund isn't your ATM." Diane appeared in the doorway, twisting a dish towel in her hands, her face pale. "Please, everyone," she said softly. "Let's talk this out calmly." "Calmly?" Caleb spun toward her, his face flushed. A glass of wine slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor, red liquid pooling like blood on the oak. "You're sitting on a fortune while we're drowning in debt." "Debt you created," I said quietly, my eyes flicking to the family portrait on the mantel, a photo from Ava's 5th birthday, all of us smiling, back when things felt simpler. Had it fallen during Caleb's outburst, or had someone turned it face down? The frame caught the firelight, reflecting nothing but empty glow. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice dripping with accusation. You know, Harold, you're not getting any younger. Why not share your wealth now, while you can see us enjoy it? The disrespect stung, sharp and bitter. This from a woman who'd never held a steady job, who lived off Caleb's charm and my occasional checks. I worked 40 years for that money, I said, each word heavy with the weight of those years. 40 years of 12-hour days, missed anniversaries, canceled plans, so you could have a good life, Caleb, so your mother and I could retire with some dignity. Dignity, Caleb laughed, a harsh, cutting sound. What's dignified? About hoarding money while your son struggles? I looked at his tailored jacket, Vanessa's diamond earrings, their shiny new SUV parked in our driveway. Their struggles looked awfully comfortable. Your struggles are your own making, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Every crisis, every emergency, every plea for cash, you created them all. The silence that followed was suffocating, tight as a noose. Diane stepped forward, her voice trembling. Harold, maybe we could... Could what? Caleb snapped, turning on her. Keep pretending he's a loving father instead of a selfish miser. The accusations hit like punches. Selfish, unloving, greedy. 40 years of sacrifice, and this was my reward. Vanessa stood, her eyes glittering with something dangerous. This is your house, right? The one Mom helped pay for? The one I grew up in? You can't just kick us out. Watch me, I said, walking to the front door and opening it wide. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet grass and the distant laughter of neighbors. Normal families, having normal evenings. When was the last time we'd laughed like that? Caleb, I said, my voice steady now. Take your wife and leave. Don't come back until you're ready to talk about your problems and your solutions, without expecting my wallet to fix them. You'll regret this, Caleb hissed, grabbing his coat. When you're old and alone, needing someone to care for you, remember this moment. Vanessa followed, her heels clicking like warning shots across the floor. Family doesn't abandon family, she muttered as the door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence left behind was heavier than their shouting. I stood there, still gripping the door handle, watching their SUV peel out of our driveway, tires screeching on the asphalt. Diane's soft footsteps came up behind me. Harold, she whispered. I turned to see the living room in disarray, wine stains on the floor, retirement papers scattered like fallen leaves. That family portrait mocking us from the mantel. 40 years, I said, more to myself than to her. 40 years I worked for him, for us. My voice broke. And this is what it comes to. The week after that awful fight with Caleb felt like holding my breath. Our house, usually filled with the soft hum of routine, Diane's humming, as she watered her herb garden, the clink of my coffee mug against the kitchen table, was eerily quiet. No calls from Caleb, no texts, no surprise visits with that fake smile he'd perfected over the years. For a decade, he'd never gone more than a few days without reaching out, usually with an apology followed by a smaller ask, a couple hundred here, 1,000 there, before the big demands rolled in. But this time, nothing. Just silence. Sat on our front porch that Saturday evening, the Oregon air cool and damp, watching neighbors go about their lives. The Wilsons across the street were unloading groceries, their kids laughing as they raced to the door. Normal families, normal evenings. I envied them. Diane joined me, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile tea. He hasn't called, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, I said, staring at the cedar tree in our front yard, the one we'd planted when Caleb was born. 40 years ago, I'd been a young engineer, working grueling shifts to afford this house, to give Caleb the life I never had growing up. I paid for his private school, his college tuition, the down payment on his first condo. Hell, I even covered his wedding, a lavish affair Diane and I couldn't afford but paid for anyway because we wanted him to start his life right. Remember when he was little? I said, my voice catching. He'd spend hours building model bridges with me. In the garage, said he wanted to be an engineer like his dad. Diane smiled faintly, but her eyes were glassy. He was so proud when you took him to your office, she said. He'd tell everyone his dad built things that lasted. What happened to that boy? When did he become this stranger who saw me as nothing more than a checkbook? I looked at the family portrait hanging above our fireplace, visible through the living room window. Ava had painted it last year. A stick figure family, all smiles, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. It was crooked now, tilted just enough to notice. Had it shifted during Caleb's outburst, or had I knocked it askew in my anger? Either way, it felt like a sign, a crack in the foundation of our family. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. A text from an unknown number, but I knew Caleb's style immediately. Dad, I hope you're proud of yourself. Ava and Noah. Need new school clothes, but I guess your money's more important than your grandkids. Don't expect to see them anytime soon. The words hit like a knife to the chest. Diane read the message over my shoulder, her breath catching. He wouldn't, she whispered, but we both knew he would. Caleb had done this before, cutting us off from Ava and Noah for weeks at a time when we didn't give in to his demands. Those kids were his ultimate weapon, the one thing he knew could break us. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with something new, something harder. He's using them again, I said, my voice low. Our grandkids, Diane, he's turning them into pawns. Diane's fingers tightened around her mug, her knuckles white. He's struggling, Harold. Maybe he's desperate. Desperate? I shook my head, thinking of Caleb's tailored suits, Vanessa's designer handbags, their shiny SUV. His desperation comes from choices he made. The gambling apps, the business ventures that never pan out, the vacations they can't afford. We've been bailing him out for years, and what's it taught him? That he can keep screwing up, and we'll always fix it. Diane didn't respond, but her silence told me she knew I was right. We'd spent decades smoothing over Caleb's crises, writing checks to cover his mistakes, believing each one was the last. But every time he came back with a new emergency, a new reason we had to help. And now, this text, using Ava and Noah to guilt us into opening our wallets again. I stood up, the porch chair creaking under me. No more, I said, more to myself than to Diane. This has to stop. She looked up at me, her eyes searching. Mine. What are you saying, Harold? I'm saying we can't keep doing this. We can't let him hold our love for those kids over our heads like a threat. My voice was steady now, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. He's had enough chances. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of what we both knew was coming. Something had shifted that week, not just in Caleb, but in me. I wasn't just a tired old man anymore, cleaning up my son's messes. I was a father who'd given everything, only to realize I'd been teaching him the wrong lessons all along. Father's Day morning started like any other in our quiet Oregon suburb. I was on the porch, coffee in hand, the newspaper open to the eye. Sports section. Diane was in the kitchen, the soft clatter of dishes drifting through the open window. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass, and the Wilsons' kids were already out riding their bikes, their laughter echoing down the street. Normal life, the kind I'd worked 40 years as an engineer to build. But normal stopped when that delivery truck pulled up. The driver handed me a cardboard box, no bigger than a bread loaf, with a plain label and no return address. "Happy Father's Day, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice cheerful, oblivious to the weight of what he'd just delivered. I thanked him, carrying the package inside, assuming it was from Caleb. Maybe a tie, a bottle of whiskey, something to smooth over last week's fight. I set it on the coffee table, where my retirement papers had scattered just days before. Diane appeared in the doorway, her apron still on, flour smudged on her cheek. "Who's it from?" she asked, her tone curious but cautious. "No idea," I said, studying the box. "No return address. Probably Caleb." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Harold," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't open it." I froze, my fingers hovering over the tape. "Why not?" "Can't." "You tell?" She pointed at the box, her hand trembling slightly. "Listen." I leaned in, and there it was, a faint, buzzing hum, like a distant swarm of insects. My heart skipped a beat. "What the hell is that?" I muttered, pulling back. The sound stopped, then started again. Louder this time, a persistent drone that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Diane's face went pale. "There's something alive in there, Harold." She backed away from the coffee table, her eyes wide. "Call someone. Now." My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, the numbers for 911 feeling foreign under my fingers. "We've got a suspicious package," I told the dispatcher, my voice steadier than I felt. "It was delivered this morning. No return address, and it's making sounds. Like buzzing." "Buzzing?" the dispatcher repeated. "Can you describe it?" I glanced at Diane, who nodded, her grip tight on my arm. "Like insects," I said, the words catching in my throat. "There are tiny holes in the box, like breathing holes." "Stay away from the package," the dispatcher said firmly. "Officers and an insect control team will be there in 10 minutes. Do not touch it." 10 minutes felt like an eternity, standing in our living room, staring at that innocent-looking box. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, but it felt cold now, the suburban quiet heavy with dread. Diane's nails dug into my arm. "Who would send us something alive?" she whispered. I didn't answer, but a cold certainty was settling in my chest. The timing, Father's Day, right after our fight with Caleb, was too perfect. This wasn't a gift. This was something else. The buzzing came again, sharper now, like whatever was inside was waking up, agitated. Diane gasped, stepping back. "Harold, did you hear that?" I nodded, my mouth dry. Whatever was in that box was very much alive, and it didn't want to be trapped. My mind raced, piecing together fragments I didn't want to face. Last month I'd noticed a charge on my credit card, $142.75 from B. Haven Supplies. I'd assumed it was something for Ava and Noah, maybe a science kit for the kids. Caleb had access to that card for emergencies, a privilege I'd given him in college and never revoked. But now, staring at that box, the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "Diane," I said, my voice barely audible. "That charge last month, B. Haven Supplies. You don't think—" Her eyes widened, the realization hitting her as hard as it hit me. "Caleb?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "He wouldn't, would he?" I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real, would mean our son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the one I'd stayed up late helping with math homework, had crossed a line I never thought possible. But the timing, the anonymous sender, the Sunday delivery, that ensured we'd be home, it all pointed to him. The buzzing grew louder, more insistent, like a warning. Diane's grip tightened until it hurt. "Harold," she said, her voice trembling. "What kind of person does this to their own parents?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just anger. This was calculated, deliberate, a message wrapped in cardboard and buzzing with malice. The sound of a car pulling into our driveway snapped us out of our trance. Through the window, I saw a police cruiser, followed by a white van marked Insect Control Services. Relief flooded through me, but it was tinged with dread. Whatever was in that box would soon be someone else's problem to handle safely. But the bigger problem, the betrayal I was starting to believe came from my own son, was only just beginning. The insect control team left our driveway with the box, now safely sealed in a secure carrier. They'd confirmed it was a small swarm of live bees, non-lethal, but enough to scare the hell out of anyone who opened it unprepared. The officer, a calm man named Jenkins, shook my hand. "Call if you think of anything else, Mr. Thompson," he said. "This kind of thing isn't random." His words hung in the air as he drove away, leaving Diane and me alone in our living room, the coffee table now bare but somehow heavier with what had just happened. Diane stood by the window, her arms crossed, staring at the empty street. "It was Caleb, wasn't it?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to. But the truth was clawing its way out, sharp and undeniable. That charge from Bee Haven Supplies, the timing of Father's Day, the silence after our fight, it all pointed to our son. "I need to know for sure," I said, picking up my phone. My hands were steady now, fueled by a mix of anger and resolve. I dialed Caleb's number, each ring tightening the knot in my chest. He picked up on the third ring. "Dad," he said, his voice bright, almost too bright, like he was auditioning for innocence. "How's your Father's Day going?" The question landed like a slap. If he was innocent, it was just a casual greeting. If he was guilty, it was a cruel taunt. "Interesting morning," I said, keeping my tone even. "Got a strange package, Caleb. You wouldn't know anything about it, would you?" A pause, just a beat too long. "No, Dad," he said quickly. "What kind of package?" But in the background, I heard it. A soft, stifled laugh, unmistakably Vanessa's. Not surprise, not confusion, but the smug chuckle of someone who thought they'd pulled off something clever. My blood ran cold. Every doubt I'd been clinging to shattered in that moment. "Just a mix-up with the delivery," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Nothing important. I'll let you go." I hung up before he could respond, before the rage boiling inside me could spill over. Diane was watching me, her eyes wide. "What did he say?" "It wasn't what he said," I replied, setting the phone down. "It was Vanessa." She laughed, Diane, like it was a damn joke. Her face crumpled, the last flicker of hope fading. "Our son sent us bees," she whispered. "To scare us. On Father's Day." I nodded, the weight of it settling over me like a storm cloud. This wasn't just a prank. It was a calculated act, a message meant to frighten us into submission. I walked to my office. the small room where I'd kept our financial records for decades. Diane followed, silent but steady, her presence a quiet anchor. I sat at my desk, the leather chair creaking under me, and opened our banking portal. "What are you doing?" Diane asked, her voice soft but curious. "Ending this," I said. My fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up the credit card account Caleb had access to. There it was, $142.75 to B Haven Supplies, dated 3 weeks ago, right after our fight. I'd given him that card for emergencies when he was in college 20 years ago. Emergencies that had morphed into a lifestyle of reckless spending. I clicked Manage Uses, my cursor hovering over his name. For a moment, I hesitated, not out of doubt, but because of the finality of it. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and hope for my son, reduced to this one click. "Enough," I whispered, and removed him as an authorized user. The screen confirmed, "Changes effective within 1 hour." Next, I changed the pins on our accounts, choosing numbers tied to Diane and me. Our wedding year, the day we bought this house. Numbers. Caleb couldn't guess, couldn't exploit. I canceled the automatic payments, his rent, his car insurance, the gym membership he'd sworn was essential. Each click felt like cutting a rope that had tethered me to his chaos for too long. Diane watched, her silence a mix of grief and understanding. "He's going to be furious," she said. "Good," I replied. "Let him feel the consequences for once." The consequences came faster than I expected. By noon, my phone rang. Caleb's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice, steadying myself before answering. "Dad, what the hell have you done?" His voice was shrill, panicked. "My card got declined at the grocery store. The car insurance payment bounced. What is this?" I took a sip of coffee, now cold, and leaned back in my chair. "Caleb," I said, calm as stone, "I know you sent that package." Silence, thick and heavy, stretched across the line. When he spoke again, his tone was pure venom. "You've lost it, Dad. Accusing me of what? Setting me up? You're ruining my life over some paranoid delusion." "Setting you up," I said, almost laughing at the absurdity. "You sent bees to our house, Caleb? Bees? And you think I'm the one playing games?" "You're insane," he snapped, but there was no denial, no confusion, just deflection. And then Vanessa's voice, in the background, sharp and careless. "God, Caleb, it was just a stupid prank to shake them up. Tell him to get over it." The words hit like a punch. Diane gasped beside me, her hand flying to her mouth. There it was, the truth, slipping out because Vanessa didn't think before she spoke. A prank, a box of live bees sent to terrify us, to shake us up. My own son. "Caleb," I said, my voice cold now, final. "A prank that endangers your parents isn't a joke. It's a choice. And so is this." I paused, letting the weight sink in. "I'm done paying for your choices." "You can't just cut me off," he shouted. "I have bills, Dad, responsibilities. Ava and Noah need things." "Responsibilities?" I said, letting the word hang. "Like respecting your parents? Like living within your means?" "You've had 10 years of my money, Caleb. No more." "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think you can cut us out and still see your grandkids? Good luck." The line went dead. I set the phone down, my hand steady despite the storm. Inside. Diane's eyes were wet, but she nodded, a quiet strength in her gaze. "He's coming here." she said. I know, I replied. An hour later, the screech of tires announced their arrival. Caleb and Vanessa stormed up our walkway, their faces twisted with fury. I opened the door before they could knock, standing firm in the doorway. Caleb's eyes blazed. "Dad, we need to talk." "We talked," I said, my voice even. "You made your choice. I made mine." "You're destroying our family," Vanessa snapped, her hands clenched. "Over some misunderstanding about a package?" "No misunderstanding," I said. "You sent bees to scare us. I'm done letting you think you can bully me into submission." Caleb stepped closer, his voice low, menacing. "You don't get it, do you? We know where you live, Dad, your routines, your life. You really want to play hardball." Diane tensed behind me, but I didn't flinch. "Are you threatening me, Caleb?" I asked, my tone calm but sharp. "Because that's a police matter now, not a family one." Vanessa grabbed his arm, pulling him back, but the damage was done. They stood there, glaring, waiting for me to cave like I always had. But not this time. "Go home," I said. "This is over." They didn't move at first, but the look in my eyes, 40 years of sacrifice turned to steel, made them turn away. As their car roared out of the driveway, I knew this wasn't the end. But I was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I sat across from Susan Mitchell in her downtown law office, the kind of place that smelled of polished wood and old books. Susan had handled our legal affairs for years, our wills, the mortgage on our Oregon home, Diane's mother's estate. She leaned back in her chair, her glasses perched on her nose, and listened as I laid it all out. The fight with Caleb, the buzzing package, Vanessa's careless confession, the threats on our doorstep. Her pen moved steadily across her notepad, her face growing graver with each detail. "This isn't just a family spat, Harold," she said, setting her pen down. "This is harassment, plain and simple. We need to protect you and Diane, legally and financially." "That's why I'm here," I said, sliding a folder of bank statements across her desk. "I want my money to go to Ava and Noah's education, not Caleb's schemes, and I need to make sure he can't come after us again." Susan nodded, pulling out a fresh legal pad. "We'll set up an educational trust for the kids," she said. "It'll cover school, college, books, legitimate expenses, managed by an independent trustee. Caleb and Vanessa won't touch a dime." She outlined the plan. Funds locked until Ava and Noah were in school, with strict oversight to prevent misuse. "And for you and Diane," she added, "your retirement accounts, your home, those stay fully protected." "What about Caleb's threats?" I asked, remembering his words. "We know where you live." "A restraining order," Susan said, her voice firm. "We'll file today, citing the package and yesterday's confrontation. If Caleb or Vanessa contact you, it's a criminal matter." Felt a weight lift, a tension I'd carried for years easing just a fraction. "How long?" I asked. "The will changes will be finalized by week's end," she said. "The restraining order could be approved today. Court officers will serve Caleb and Vanessa by tomorrow morning." I signed the papers, each stroke of the pen feeling like a step toward freedom. As I left Susan's office, the Oregon sun felt warmer, the world a little lighter. 2 days later, Susan called. "It's done, Harold," she said. "The documents were served this morning. Caleb and Vanessa have no claim to your estate, and the restraining order is in place." I thanked her and hung up, sitting in my armchair, watching Diane tend her herb garden through the kitchen window. The Wilsons' kids were playing across the street, their laughter a reminder of what normal life could be. Diane joined me, her hands smelling faintly of rosemary. "It's over?" she asked. "It's over," I said, taking her hand. For the first time in years, our home felt like ours again. No looming crises, no manipulative calls, no threats about Ava and Noah. The trust would secure their future, free from Caleb's grasp. We'd done our part, not out of spite, but out of love, for them and for ourselves. That evening, we sat down to dinner, just the two of us, the quiet wrapping around us like a warm blanket. Diane's herb garden glowed in the sunset, and the first time in a decade, I felt truly at peace. As I sit here now, watching the sunset paint Diane's herb garden in shades of gold, I think about the boy Caleb used to be, the one who built bridges with me in the garage, who hugged me tight at his high school graduation. That boy is gone, replaced by a man who sent a box of bees to scare his own parents. But in that betrayal, I found something I'd lost over the years. Clarity. Love doesn't mean saying yes to every demand. It doesn't mean sacrificing your peace to fix someone else's mistakes. Diane and I learned that the hard way. By setting boundaries, cutting off Caleb's financial lifeline, securing Ava and Noah's future with a trust, and protecting our home with a restraining order, we reclaimed our lives. We taught our son that actions have consequences, even if it broke our hearts to do it. Life is quieter now. No calls begging for money, no threats about our grandkids. Just Diane and me, our garden, our home, our hard-earned peace. If there's one lesson here, it's this: family isn't about enabling bad choices. It's about loving enough to say no, to protect what matters most: yourself, your marriage, your legacy. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? We'd love to hear your story. Until next time, thank you for listening.